the idea that's expressed in a number of the world's spiritual traditions is that until we can really get a grasp on one important aspect of our own life and being, it's very difficult to really seriously embrace any sort of spiritual path. And the particular idea that they encourage us wrapping our minds around is the idea, some would call it impermanence, but in a more direct way, it would be the idea of our own mortality. That basically we're here for a few minutes. We're not here for long. I mean, if you live, I come from a long-living family, apparently. My father died, he was 92. My mother's 93, and she's back in New York right now, so at this time of day, she's probably going to a yoga class of hers right now. She goes to yoga and Tai Chi a couple of times a week. Grandmothers, all of them, made it into the late stages of life, 90s. So my chances are pretty good. So I could probably get comfortable with putting some of this spirituality stuff off a little longer. But what they say in some traditions is you need to really consider this idea of our own mortality. And then, particularly in Tibetan tradition, they say there are three things you might want to focus on when thinking about this whole idea of death and dying. And one is, you ask yourself a question. Some of these Buddhist lamas will present it to you and they say, here's the idea. Death is certain. The nice thing about Buddha's teachings, he said, never accept anything because anyone tells you. Work it out for yourself. So, you know, you take an idea like that, death is certain, and then you try and work with it. And you ask yourself a question, is this true? And then maybe you ask, maybe I could get a better handle on this if I could figure out somebody who never did die. And the numbers of those are few, we could say. We could also say none. Because as far as I know, even Buddha died. He gave us the great advice. Jesus died. Grandmother's great. Everybody's gone. Now, here's the second thing to chew on. That the time of death is uncertain. And once you think that through, you find that probably there's some truth to that as well. I have often thought it would be wonderful. You know, if I had a hand, if anybody had asked me how to set up the pattern for human living, I would have set it up differently. So that, you know, we would die, everyone at birth would know that at age 100, 120, whatever, we'd know that at the stroke of midnight, on your 120th year, we'd check out. And I thought that would be wonderful, because here's the deal. It wouldn't be boring, because listen to me. The first 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, you could focus on just nothing. Let's just have fun. Let's eat ice cream all day, you know. Let's go to parties. Let's do all the silly things that we need to do. You could raise a family. You could do all these things. You could make all the money you want or make none. And then, you know, 10 years to go, you get to be 110. All right, now's the time for spirituality. And you go off to the forest. And then when the bell rings, you go off and you've gotten it together. Wonderful setup, but nobody asked me. So since it's not that way, and since, in fact, time is uncertain, it puts some constraints on our views of our own behavior. And we had to think it through a little bit more deeply. And so you end up running into things like in At the Feet of the Master, where he says, live as though you would die tomorrow. Study as though you will live forever. So it alters sort of your perspective on those sort of The third thing they would say to think about is, if you have bought into this first one, that death is certain, if you bought into the second one, that the time isn't so sure when it's going to happen, then the next question you have to ask yourself, and the one that will really kind of tip you supposedly in the direction of a valid spiritual practice, is, at the time of death, what in fact is it that will be of value to you? What is it that will be of value at that time? And again, you go through the list on my bank account. So perhaps money is not the thing that's going to be of help at that moment. How about our friends? During the course of a lifetime, we build up many wonderful friendships. But we're parting from all of that at that moment. And then you get to the point of, how about the one who has actually been your very closest and deepest friend throughout life? The one and only one who has never deserted you. This body that we live in. And that's the very thing that is being left behind. So what is it that's of value at that moment? And so then the answer that comes back from that would be that the only thing that is really of any value is the spiritual experience that you have been able to have. Your spiritual understanding, your connection to spirit, is the only thing that you will in fact carry with you at that moment. So this whole process of, walking ourselves through this type of thinking, the whole point of it is really just to kind of get a sense that there is a different set of priorities. If we really buy into any of this, then our priorities necessarily shift, at least somewhat. So then, at that point, it's said that once we've kind of embraced this type of thinking, at least, then there is at least the possibility that we can embark on a sincere and serious spiritual practice. And that before that, as long as we think we've got all the time in the world, and as long as we think that other things have a higher priority and a greater value, then we'll be partway. Although, again, not to say that partway is bad. We all do the best we can at any given moment. But the idea often is that we do respond according to what we identify as most important. And if there is something that we can actually become convinced is the most important, then it might be good to put more energy in